The man behind the icon. 12 talents most people never knew he had. Everyone knows the moonwalk. Everyone knows the glove, the lean, the falsetto cry that made stadiums shake. But strip away the spotlight for a moment, and there's a much stranger, much more interesting person underneath all of it. A person who could compose an entire orchestra with nothing but his own throat, who held a real United States patent, and who once designed a battle plan for a water balloon fight with the seriousness of a general. Before we get into it, which of these sounds the most unbelievable to you right now? Keep that thought, because by the end you might change your answer. A voice built on purpose. Most people only ever heard one version of Michael Jackson's voice. That light, airy, almost boyish tone he used whenever a microphone or a camera was nearby. What a lot of people don't realize is that this wasn't simply how he naturally sounded. Jackson was a trained tenor with an unusually wide range, estimated at around 4 octaves. But people who worked closely with him, vocal coaches, producers, engineers, have described being caught off guard the first time they heard him speak in his natural, noticeably deeper register away from the stage. Why keep the higher, softer tone in public? Because it served the music. That brighter placement is what allowed the sharp falsetto hits and the sudden melodic leaps that defined songs like Human Nature, Billie Jean, and The Way You Make Me Feel. In other words, the voice the world associates with Michael Jackson wasn't just a gift. It was partly a deliberate performance choice, shaped and maintained on purpose. He even deliberately shifted his voice in certain recordings for effect. In the rapt breakdown of In the Closet, or the opening of You Rock My World, with Chris Tucker, he suddenly dropped into a deeper, more menacing register. Some have suggested he kept the higher speaking voice in public to protect his vocal cords, given the intense demands of constant high-intensity singing. Whatever the real reason, the fact that he could control and wear his speaking voice like a costume shows an extraordinary level of professional discipline. Have you ever heard an interview clip where his speaking voice sounded different from what you expected? Drop a timestamp in the comments if you remember one. The human multitrack recorder. Here's the part that tends to surprise people the most. Michael Jackson never learned to read or write sheet music. He had no formal instrumental training at a professional level. And yet, according to musicians, engineers, and producers who worked directly with him, testimony that later came up repeatedly in copyright trials, where he had to prove in court that songs originated with him, he wrote complete, fully arranged songs using nothing but his own voice and a cassette recorder. He wouldn't just hum a melody. He would walk into a room and sing the drum pattern first with extremely precise beatboxing, then layer in a bass line, then sing every note of a string arrangement part by part, then add horn stabs, all recorded in passes on a single tape. One producer who worked with him described mornings where Jackson arrived with a brand new song written overnight, called in a guitarist, and sang each individual note of each chord aloud until the player could reproduce it exactly. Songs including Billie Jean, Beat It, and The Girl Is Mine reportedly started this way, as a kind of one-man vocal orchestra, mapped out completely in his head before a single professional musician ever touched an instrument. Musicians who translated those tapes into real instrumentation have said the arrangements were harmonically precise, not rough sketches. In court, he once explained, "I'll just sing the bass part into the tape recorder, then put the chords of the melody over the bass lick, and that's what inspires the melody." On Billie Jean, he described 4 different bass lines, each with its own personality, giving the track its distinctive character. Try to picture that for a second. An entire string section, bass line, and drum groove all existing first as one person's voice on a cheap cassette. What instrument do you think would be hardest to fake with your own voice? Strings, brass, or drums? Let us know in the comments. A body engineered for precision. Jackson's dancing is famous, but the amount of physical control behind it is easy to underestimate. Take the moonwalk. The footwork, the weighted heel drag, the backward glide, has been copied by thousands of dancers since the 1980s. What's much harder to copy is what happens above the waist. While his legs handled the technical slide, his upper body stayed almost eerily still, without the natural bounce most people's shoulders produce when they shift their weight. Try walking a few steps right now while keeping your shoulders completely level. It's harder than it looks, and that separation between lower body motion and upper body stillness is a big part of why the illusion worked as well as it did. That same physical discipline shows up elsewhere. Jackson trained in martial arts under Grandmaster Cam Ewan, a well-regarded instructor based in Hollywood, and he treated it as more than casual exercise. Former collaborators have pointed to the sharp, almost too fast bursts of movement in his choreography. Quick strikes, sudden stillness, controlled snaps, as coming directly from that martial arts background rather than pure dance training. He held a black belt in karate and was obsessed with Bruce Lee, rewatching the films repeatedly to study the movement. Many of the kicks, punches, and blocks in Thriller, Bad, and Smooth Criminal carry clear martial arts influence. Low center of gravity, power generated from the hips, and precise control of force. And then there's the pain most audiences never saw. In January 1984, during the filming of a Pepsi commercial, a pyrotechnic effect malfunctioned and set Jackson's hair on fire, leaving him with serious scalp burns that required hospital treatment. That incident is well documented. What's less talked about is how, in the years that followed, he continued performing full concerts, 2 or 3 hours of demanding choreography, while dealing with the kind of chronic pain, old injuries, and physical strain that would sideline most performers entirely. People who toured with him have said audiences rarely had any idea what he was working through on a given night. Does knowing what was happening behind the scenes change how you watch old performance footage? That's worth sitting with for a second. An engineer, not just a performer. Here's a fact that surprises even a lot of longtime fans. Michael Jackson is a named inventor on an actual United States patent. It goes back to the Smooth Criminal short film, where he and his dancers appeared to lean forward at an impossible 45-degree angle, seemingly defying gravity. On film, that effect was created the old-fashioned way, hidden cables and a harness. But Jackson wanted to bring that same move to live concerts, where wires would be visible and impractical. So he worked with his longtime costume designers, Michael Bush and Dennis Tompkins, to design a mechanical solution. The result? Granted by the U.S. Patent Office in October 1993 as Method and Means for Creating Anti-Gravity Illusion, describes a specially built shoe with a slot cut into the heel that could lock onto a peg rising from the stage floor at the right moment. With his feet anchored that way, a performer could lean forward at an angle that would otherwise be physically impossible to hold, though it still required serious core strength to pull off safely. It's a strange thing to picture. One of the biggest pop stars in the world sitting down with designers to sketch out heel mechanics and stage rigging like a working engineer. He debuted the shoes during the Dangerous World Tour, and the move became one of the most recognized illusions in live music history. Did you know that move had actual paperwork behind it? Most people assume it was just clever camera work. The private side nobody photographed. Away from the stage, a different picture starts to form. Jackson filled personal sketchbooks with detailed pencil drawings over the years, studies of faces, architectural ideas, renderings of characters he loved, including Mickey Mouse, Peter Pan, and other Disney figures. He never exhibited this work publicly or promoted himself as a visual artist. By most accounts, it was simply something he did for himself. Collections of dozens of his drawings have later been auctioned, including self-portraits, studies of chairs, doors, airplanes, and even U.S. presidents. His mother Catherine recalled that he had been drawing since childhood, and his father Joe also had artistic talent. He also played piano largely by ear. He had no formal training on the instrument, but people who spent time with him privately have described him sitting down and working out full harmonic ideas intuitively, using the keys almost like a notebook, a way to chase down a feeling before it had words or a finished melody. Then there's Neverland Ranch, which by multiple accounts housed one of the largest private collections of vintage arcade and pinball machines anywhere in the world, alongside animal enclosures, a movie theater, and amusement rides. Guests who visited have also described a running joke that became something closer to legend. Jackson enjoyed elaborate water balloon ambushes, reportedly using two-way radios and plan positions to coordinate surprise attacks on visiting friends and staff. Whether that level of tactical planning is exaggerated in the retelling or not, it points to something real about how he approached even light-hearted moments, with the same intensity and attention to detail people saw in his stage work. If you had to guess, what do you think his favorite arcade game actually was? Take a guess in the comments. You might be surprised by what other viewers say. Costume as strategy. One more thing worth mentioning before we wrap up. The way Jackson dressed wasn't just personal style, it was functional. His performance outfits, military-style jackets, a single jeweled glove, high-waisted trousers, shoulder detailing were built with an eye toward where an audience's attention naturally lands during a show. The glove drew focus to his most technically demanding hand movements. The raised waistline visually lengthened his legs to emphasize footwork. None of it was accidental. It was closer to stage design than fashion in the traditional sense. Every detail served to direct the eye and highlight technique. So, who was he really? Take all of this together. The composer who never learned to read music but built entire orchestrations with his own voice, the martial artist whose dance moves borrowed real combat discipline, the inventor with his name on AU's patent, the private sketch artist and self-taught pianist, the man planning water balloon ambushes with the same intensity he brought to a world tour, and a much fuller picture starts to emerge than the one most people carry around in their heads. Michael Jackson was not only the king of pop. He was a multi-talented mind, an extremely disciplined musical craftsman, a stage engineer, and a quiet visual artist. These hidden abilities weren't side notes. They were the foundation that allowed him to create performances and recordings that still have not been fully replicated. Which of these caught you most off guard? Was it the beatbox tapes, the patent, the drawings, or something else entirely? Tell us in the comments below, and if there's a hidden talent or story you think deserves its own deep dive, let us know. We're always looking for what to cover next.